Turns out Michelle's been busy working on a new podcast, and so far, it's been a flop. The first 2 episodes have been up all day and only gotten a few thousand views on YouTube.
What if the most influential women in American public life isn't running for office, but still shaping the country's future? Michelle Obama has never needed a campaign to command attention. From the White House to bestseller lists, her voice has remained a constant force, measured, powerful, and unwavering. While others fight for power, she continues to lead through purpose, redefining what public influence looks like in the 21st century. But how has she managed to stay so relevant, even years after leaving the White House? Why do millions still turn to her for clarity, reassurance, and leadership? And what exactly did she just reveal that's sending waves through the national conversation? Let's dive in. It's hard to forget the night Barack Obama stood on that stage in Chicago's Grant Park in 2008, addressing a sea of supporters with his wife and 2 young daughters beside him. That moment didn't just mark the beginning of a new political chapter for the United States. It was also the beginning of a life in the public eye for Michelle Obama, a woman who would soon redefine what it meant to be First Lady. Over the next 8 years, she transformed the role into something much larger than ceremonial. And yet, behind the elegance, the powerful speeches, and the national campaigns was someone navigating enormous personal change, adjusting her sense of self while raising 2 daughters in the most scrutinized residence in the world. Born Michelle LaVaughn Robinson on the south side of Chicago, she had already lived a life filled with discipline, purpose, and resilience long before the White House ever entered the picture. A graduate of Princeton University and Harvard Law School, Michelle was a successful attorney, a hospital executive, and a community leader. Her marriage to Barack Obama was a partnership of equals, grounded in shared values and mutual respect. But once he began his climb up the political ladder, her world changed drastically. As Barack's political career accelerated from state senator to United States senator, Michelle found herself juggling professional demands with growing public interest in her personal life. By the time Barack announced his candidacy for president in February 2007, Michelle's life had already shifted under her feet. When she stepped into the role of First Lady in January 2009, Michelle Obama brought more than just grace to the White House. She brought direction. Unlike many of her predecessors, she wasn't content with staying behind the scenes. Instead, she launched multiple high-impact initiatives, each reflecting her values and passions. One of the earliest and most visible was Let's Move, a national campaign aimed at tackling childhood obesity. With partnerships across schools, communities, and even large corporations, she turned health and fitness into a cultural conversation. She dug up the South Lawn to start a vegetable garden, inviting school children to learn about nutrition, while encouraging families across the country to adopt healthier habits. It wasn't just about what children ate, it was about how they lived. She visited schools, joined children in exercise routines, and challenged food companies to reformulate products. Let's Move was not a feel-good vanity project. It was policy-driven, research-based, and implemented with an educator's clarity. But she didn't stop there. Michelle co-founded Joining Forces, a program supporting military families. Then came Reach Higher, encouraging young people to pursue education beyond high school. And Let Girls Learn, an international initiative promoting girls' education in underserved regions, reflected her global thinking. These campaigns weren't random. Each of them stemmed from Michelle's deep belief in equity, opportunity, and the power of education to transform lives. Still, as her public profile grew, so did the pressure. Every move, outfit, word, and gesture was analyzed by both supporters and critics. While Barack navigated the political trenches, Michelle took on a more nuanced burden, being a role model for women, mothers, and especially young girls of color who saw themselves in her. She often spoke of the challenges of raising 2 daughters, Malia and Sasha, amid constant scrutiny. It was one thing to live in the public eye, it was another to parent in it. She wasn't immune to controversy either. From her candid remarks about race to the media's fixation on her fashion choices, Michelle constantly walked a tightrope. expected to be polished but relatable, outspoken but non-threatening, strong but always smiling. Her ability to maintain her authenticity in the face of that pressure became one of her most admirable traits. It's what made people listen when she spoke, and she did speak, powerfully and often. One of her most memorable moments came during the 2016 Democratic National Convention, where she declared, "When they go low, we go high." That single line echoed across the country, solidifying her voice in the national conscience as not just the First Lady, but a moral compass in increasingly turbulent times. That same year, as the Obamas prepared to leave the White House, Michelle's emotional farewell speech made headlines. She thanked the American people, encouraged young people not to be afraid, and reminded the nation that their voices mattered. January 2017 marked the end of the Obamas' official chapter in Washington, D.C., but for Michelle, it was the beginning of something even more personal. She left the White House not as a former First Lady bound for obscurity, but as one of the most admired women in the world. And while the media waited to see what she would do next, perhaps a Senate run, maybe even a presidential campaign, Michelle took her time. She disappeared from the spotlight for a short while, retreating to a quieter life that allowed her to reflect, reconnect with her daughters, and consider the next chapter on her own terms. What emerged wasn't a political comeback, it was something more deliberate, more measured, and undeniably more personal. Michelle was no longer just the First Lady of the United States. She was now a best-selling author, a public speaker, a cultural force, and a voice for millions of people trying to find their own path. And the next few years would show just how much her influence could grow without ever needing to be on a ballot. When Michelle Obama stepped out of the White House on 20th January 2017, it marked more than just the end of a presidency. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one that would unfold not through politics or policy, but through storytelling, culture, and a deeper, quieter form of influence. No longer bound by the formal constraints of being First Lady, Michelle was finally free to shape her legacy on her own terms. And she did it not with fanfare, but with grace, strategy, and timing that surprised many. Her first major move came in the form of a memoir. On 13th November 2018, Michelle Obama released her autobiography, Becoming. It wasn't just a book, it was an event. The memoir offered an intimate, unfiltered look at her journey from the South Side of Chicago to Princeton University, Harvard Law School, the White House, and beyond. The book resonated with millions, quickly becoming one of the best-selling memoirs of all time. Within just 15 days of its release, it sold over 2 million copies. It eventually crossed more than 10 million copies globally by 2019, translated into multiple languages, and found its place on bookshelves and bedside tables in homes across the world. Becoming was more than a personal account. It was a cultural touchstone, opening conversations about race, womanhood, marriage, parenting, and identity. Readers connected with her vulnerability, her reflections on the challenges of marriage, on miscarriage, on parenting in the public eye. She was no longer just the First Lady. She was every woman, every mother, every working professional navigating life's complexities with humor, frustration, and honesty. Her honesty struck a nerve, and it was clear Michelle Obama wasn't stepping back from public life. She was simply stepping forward in a new direction. That direction became even clearer when in early 2019, she and Barack signed a major multi-year production deal with Netflix. The deal gave birth to Higher Ground Productions, their own media company aimed at producing content that uplifts voices, tells diverse stories, and explores themes of democracy, empathy, and hope. Michelle explained that the company wasn't just about politics or activism, it was about shifting the narrative, bringing forward stories that too often go unheard. One of Higher Ground's earliest projects was a documentary adaptation of Becoming, released in May 2020. The film followed Michelle on her nationwide book tour and offered a behind-the-scenes look at the impact her story had on audiences. With deeply personal moments, school visits, and conversations with young women, the documentary expanded the book's emotional reach, giving audiences not just her words, but her presence. The project was well received for its authenticity and quiet power, solidifying Michelle's role as a cultural figure whose relevance extended far beyond the White House. Michelle also became more selective about her public appearances. Instead of running from interview to interview, she curated her presence, speaking only when she felt she had something to say. And when she did speak, people listened. Her interviews, whether with Oprah Winfrey or on her own podcast, felt more like conversations than broadcasts. They were measured, thoughtful, and disarming in their sincerity. She often chose to share personal anecdotes, her struggles with self-doubt, the challenges of being under constant scrutiny, and the lessons she learned from her parents, Marion and Fraser Robinson. In July 2020, Michelle launched the Michelle Obama podcast on Spotify. It was another pivot, this time into the audio space, offering her audience more intimate access to her thoughts. The podcast featured conversations with her husband, her brother, friends, and colleagues, tackling issues like marriage, mentorship, and the emotional weight of public life. What stood out wasn't just the topics, it was how human the conversations felt. Listeners got to hear her laugh, sigh, pause, and reflect, in a way that made her feel less like a former First Lady and more like a familiar friend. It was a powerful reminder of her ability to lead through authenticity rather than authority. In the years following the Obama presidency, Michelle became a public figure defined by boundaries. She drew clear lines around what she would and would not do. She did not wade into partisan politics. She did not use her platform for political attacks. And most notably, despite constant calls and speculation, she continued to state firmly that she had no intention of running for elected office. In interview after interview, she repeated the same answer. Politics was not her path. Her commitment to making an impact outside of formal government was a choice, and a powerful one at that. During the 2018 and 2020 election cycles, however, she did lend her voice to important causes. Through the nonprofit When We All Vote, which she co-founded, Michelle focused on increasing voter registration and civic engagement, particularly among young people and communities of color. She appeared in virtual events, delivered powerful messages, and reminded Americans of their agency. Even without running for office, her influence on the democratic process was undeniable. One of the more surprising ways Michelle stayed active was through children's media. In March 2021, she debuted Waffles Plus Mochi on Netflix, a playful children's series designed to teach kids about healthy food and nutrition. The show combined puppetry, celebrity guest appearances, and travel segments, making learning feel like an adventure. It was a continuation of her Let's Move campaign, but this time with a puppet sidekick and a global culinary lens. The show wasn't just for kids. It was designed to bring families together, spark curiosity, and reinforce her lifelong belief that education can be fun and powerful. As Michelle moved through this period, her public image became one of quiet control. She wasn't everywhere all the time. She didn't saturate headlines. She picked her moments. When she released her second book, The Light We Carry, in November 2022, she once again took the spotlight, but on her terms. The book, filled with reflections on navigating uncertainty and managing anxiety, arrived at a time when the world was still grappling with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Its central message, finding strength in vulnerability and light in dark moments, resonated with a global audience hungry for reassurance. In many ways, The Light We Carry marked a shift. While Becoming had been about her past and the journey toward identity, this new book focused on the present, on endurance, personal tools, and emotional clarity. It was less about what she had done and more about how she was doing. It invited readers into her current mindset and encouraged them to find peace on their own. The accompanying book tour was similarly intimate, featuring sit-downs with Oprah Winfrey, Ellen DeGeneres, and other close allies. Each conversation peeled back another layer of Michelle's worldview, delivered not as a lecture, but as lived wisdom. Through all of this, what became most apparent was Michelle Obama's evolving approach to influence. She was no longer tethered to a single role or title. She was not a candidate, not an official, and not a pundit. She was a storyteller, an advocate, a connector. And with every book, podcast, or documentary, she was planting the seeds of something broader, something more enduring. By the end of 2023, questions began to rise once again. Would she finally enter politics? Would she endorse a candidate? Was she building up to something more? Michelle stayed quiet, until one day, in March 2024, she wasn't. By the time the world entered the uncertainty of the 2020 election season, Michelle Obama had already proven she didn't need political office to influence political outcomes. Her voice carried weight, her words resonated across generations, and her ability to inspire civic action remained undiminished. And in that pivotal year, as the United States wrestled with a global pandemic, racial justice protests, and a highly polarized election, Michelle chose to speak. In August 2020, she delivered a searing keynote address during the Democratic National Convention. Speaking remotely, she offered not just political endorsement, but moral clarity. Her words were calm but firm, and her tone carried a sense of urgency that felt deeply personal. She reminded Americans of the stakes, of the values at risk, and the importance of empathy in leadership. Her now widely quoted line, "Being president doesn't change who you are, it reveals who you are," landed hard in a country divided and grieving. It wasn't just political commentary, it was a plea for decency, for integrity, and for turning pain into purpose. That moment reignited widespread speculation about Michelle's political future. Once again, there were calls for her to run for office, everything from senator to president. Commentators debated her electability, analysts measured her poll numbers, and media outlets questioned whether she could be the answer to the Democratic Party's future. But Michelle remained consistent. In interviews throughout 2020 and beyond, she clearly stated she had no desire to run. The reasons were personal and unchanging. She valued her privacy, her role as a mother, and her ability to impact change without holding a title. Despite that, her political impact remained tangible. Through her organization, When We All Vote, she played a crucial role in increasing voter turnout among young people and minority communities. The group organized virtual events, text banking sessions, and social media campaigns. Michelle appeared in public service announcements, hosted digital summits, and even made surprise video appearances to keep people engaged. Her focus was always clear: informed participation, not party loyalty. During the pandemic, Michelle also began speaking out about mental health, particularly the emotional toll that isolation, racial trauma, and political chaos were having on young people. In several interviews, she acknowledged her own struggles with what she described as a form of low-grade depression. It was a rare admission from a public figure of her stature, and it resonated widely. Rather than portray invulnerability, she leaned into honesty, showing that emotional resilience doesn't mean avoiding struggle, it means moving through it. That vulnerability fed directly into the themes of her second book, The Light We Carry, published in November 2022. The book offered reflections and strategies for navigating fear, anxiety, and uncertainty. It was part memoir, part self-help, part guidebook for navigating a world that felt increasingly unstable. She wrote about small daily rituals that helped her find steadiness, about knitting as a meditative practice, about the importance of friendships and humor. And once again, Michelle's voice wasn't just comforting, it empowered. She didn't pretend to have all the answers, but she shared the tools that helped her survive hard times. Readers responded with gratitude, especially younger audiences navigating their own mental health journeys. As 2023 unfolded, Michelle's profile remained high, yet always tightly controlled. She was selective about her appearances, careful about her messaging, and deliberate about her choices. She continued working behind the scenes through higher ground productions, producing thoughtful content that spotlighted overlooked voices. And she remained deeply involved in civic engagement, often focusing on long-term cultural change rather than short-term political gain. Then, as the new year approached, political speculation returned. With the next presidential election on the horizon and growing fatigue over polarizing political figures, the question began resurfacing with urgency. Could Michelle Obama be persuaded to run? Once again, she made her stance clear. In multiple interviews and statements, including one as recent as early 2024, Michelle unequivocally stated she would not run for president. She reiterated her reasons, most notably, the impact it would have on her family and personal life. Her daughters were now adults navigating their own lives, and Michelle wanted to protect the sense of normalcy they had worked hard to reclaim after leaving the White House. She also expressed that public service does not have to come through elected office. She felt she could make a greater impact through writing, mentoring, speaking, and producing. Yet something began to shift in early 2024, not in her political ambitions, but in the way she was re-entering the national conversation. Michelle began appearing more frequently in public forums. She sat for long-form interviews, released podcast episodes, and shared stories from her post-White House journey. She was reflective, but also looking forward. In a joint appearance with her brother, Craig Robinson, promoting their new podcast, she opened up about their childhood, values, and the importance of family support. The tone was warm, personal, and filled with anecdotes that connected with listeners across generations. This new wave of public engagement didn't come across as a campaign, but rather as preparation for something more expansive. It wasn't about office or election cycles, it was about something deeper, creating space for the next generation to lead, and offering them the support, tools, and frameworks that she wished she'd had when she was younger. For Michelle, it was never about power. It was about purpose. And as she leaned more fully into that purpose, it became clear that her next steps would not come with slogans or ballots, but with intention, clarity, and a renewed focus on the work ahead. As 2024 unfolded, Michelle Obama continued to maintain her position as one of the most respected public figures in American life, not through political office or partisan headlines, but through the quiet consistency of her values and voice. Her influence did not rely on frequent media appearances. Instead, it was built on years of earned trust, honest storytelling, and her continued ability to engage audiences on a personal level. While she remained selective in her public presence, Michelle occasionally reappeared for special events, interviews, and collaborative efforts, especially those aligned with her long-standing commitments to education, family, health, and civic engagement. Her impact was especially visible through the continued work of Higher Ground Productions, the media company she and Barack Obama co-founded. The company had steadily released documentaries, films, and audio content aimed at elevating underrepresented voices and sparking national conversations. Through this platform, Michelle had already engaged audiences with powerful storytelling, including the Becoming documentary in 2023 and the more recent release of The Light We Carry, Michelle Obama and Oprah Winfrey in Conversation in 2023. That special, based on her second book, aired on Netflix and offered viewers an intimate window into her thoughts on self-worth, anxiety, resilience, and building confidence, especially during turbulent times. The discussion felt less like a staged interview and more like a conversation between two women who had lived through public scrutiny and found strength in their shared experiences. The success of The Light We Carry special helped extend the reach of Michelle's second book, which had already resonated with millions since its publication in November 2022. Unlike Becoming, which told the story of her life from childhood through the White House years, The Light We Carry focused on how she coped with fear, change, and self-doubt, topics that became especially relevant during the COVID-19 pandemic and the societal challenges that followed. The book didn't offer step-by-step solutions, but it shared the tools and mental frameworks that helped her maintain balance. from practical routines like journaling to internal reflections about the power of friendship and identity. Michelle's willingness to speak about mental health, especially her own, marked an important shift in how public figures addressed emotional well-being. In a 2020 interview, she described experiencing low-grade depression amid the global health crisis, political division, and racial unrest. Her candidness helped normalize discussions about mental health, particularly for women and communities of color. It was a reminder that strength isn't the absence of struggle, it's the willingness to face it. In keeping with her mission to encourage informed civic participation, Michelle remained active in When We All Vote, the nonprofit she co-founded in 2018. As the United States prepared for another election cycle, the organization amplified its outreach efforts, particularly among young voters. By early 2024, the group had engaged over 10 million eligible voters through registration drives, education campaigns, and digital outreach. Michelle's involvement was not about party politics, it was about reminding people that their voices mattered, especially at the local level. Although public speculation around a possible presidential run surfaced once again in 2024, Michelle was quick to dismiss it. In multiple interviews, including those with national outlets and at public events, she reiterated that she had no interest in running for office. Her focus, she explained, remained on family, personal well-being, and contributing to civic life in ways that aligned with her values. The calls for her candidacy never fully disappeared, but her message stayed clear and unwavering. Instead, Michelle continued to support and inspire through storytelling. Her conversations, whether in live forums, pre-recorded specials, or written essays, were always rooted in empathy. She avoided the combative style so often associated with politics, and focused instead on listening, reflecting, and encouraging others to lead from where they stood. Her influence wasn't measured in speeches or headlines alone. It lived in classrooms, where students read Becoming as part of the school curriculum. It lived in libraries and living rooms, where parents discussed the light we carry with their children. It lived in community groups and voter registration drives supported by When We All Vote. Michelle Obama's public life was now defined not by what she planned to do next, but by what she had quietly continued to do all along. Show up with intention and build spaces where people felt seen. By the spring of 2024, she remained a defining voice in the American conscience, not because she sought the spotlight, but because she used it sparingly and wisely. Her story had become more than just personal narrative. It had become a framework others could look to as they shaped their own. And through her books, media work, and ongoing civic efforts, she reminded the country that leadership does not begin at the ballot box. It begins with presence, values, and the courage to keep going, even when the path isn't fully visible. As she moved forward, Michelle Obama remained exactly what she had always been, a steady, compassionate presence. A woman who spoke not to impress, but to connect. And while she had no intention of returning to the campaign trail, her impact continued to ripple far beyond the spaces where politics typically reached. Even without holding office, Michelle Obama has managed to shape American discourse in lasting ways. As 2024 progresses, she continues to lead, not through political declarations, but through influence built on trust, authenticity, and lived experience. Her voice remains one of the few in public life that resonates across age, class, and party lines. And with each appearance, speech, or project, she reinforces a powerful idea: that leadership is not confined to government. It begins wherever one decides to make a difference. Her refusal to enter politics has only sharpened her impact. Unlike many former public figures, Michelle Obama has deliberately chosen to work outside the machinery of campaigns and elected office. This decision hasn't distanced her from public life. It has given her the freedom to move without the constraints of partisanship. She isn't expected to defend a political platform. Instead, she advocates for values, integrity, inclusion, education, and emotional well-being. In doing so, she reaches people who may no longer trust politicians, but still trust her. The institutions she helped build reflect that philosophy. When We All Vote has become a fixture in nonpartisan voter outreach, helping to register millions of Americans while staying focused on participation rather than party loyalty. Higher Ground Productions continues to partner with platforms like Netflix and Audible to tell stories that center community, empathy, and identity. These are not passive media ventures. They are tools of soft power, reshaping how people see themselves and their role in society. Michelle's strength lies in her ability to connect the personal and the political without blurring the two. When she speaks about education, she does so not just as a former First Lady, but as someone who grew up navigating public schools in working-class Chicago. When she talks about mental health, she doesn't present herself as a spokesperson. She shares as someone who has struggled, processed, and learned. That transparency gives her words weight. People don't just hear her, they believe her. In the current moment, where institutions are questioned and trust in leadership remains low, Michelle Obama's model of influence feels increasingly relevant. She represents a form of leadership grounded in empathy, built slowly, and maintained through consistency. She doesn't command headlines with outrage or conflict. Instead, she moves steadily, choosing moments that matter and speaking with purpose when the noise fades. Her recent projects, including the Light We Carry special and the new podcast with her brother Craig Robinson, offer a blueprint for connection that doesn't rely on outrage or fear. They are rooted in conversation, reflection, and shared experience. And while they may not make breaking news every day, they quietly build something more durable, a sense of community and belonging that transcends political cycles. For younger generations, Michelle Obama remains a powerful example. She shows that you don't need a title to lead. You don't need a campaign to have a cause. What you need is clarity, courage, and commitment. Whether it's a student starting a new chapter, a parent navigating challenges, or a community organizer trying to inspire change, her story continues to remind people that impact starts from within. As the country looks ahead to another contentious election cycle, Michelle's role will likely remain what it has been for years: steady, thoughtful, and just visible enough to remind the public that leadership can look different. It can be quieter, more patient, more personal. And maybe that's the point. In a time of loud voices and fleeting attention, Michelle Obama has chosen something else entirely. She has chosen depth over drama, reflection over reaction. And as she continues to shape culture, uplift voices, and expand access to opportunity, she shows that sometimes the strongest presence isn't the one shouting the loudest, but the one who never stopped listening. With that, we have reached the end of today's video. If you have come that far with us, be sure to check out other videos on the channel.